good, you know, I mean, he's only up to here. Our next kid is taller than me, bigger than me, and getting into a lot more really difficult problems. So we've picked an older kid to do that with. What we're going to do is take the course of about 4 meetings and shorten them down with like, okay, time to breathe. Okay, now we're 3 weeks later to show you the process. Because I think what happens too often is we start to do the plan and we never talk about checking up on the plan, the fidelity of it. Are we doing it correctly? When does the plan need to be tweaked and revised? So evaluating the plan. So we will actually get all the way through a plan, show you some data, show you how we took that data, or how these guys really took the data, and where we need to continue to tweak it and what was working. So that will be after lunch. In between, because I really believe that lunch should be sacred, and I don't like the idea of working lunches, which is why I'm giving you 10 minutes as a team to go back over as your ticket to lunch, finish the questionnaire. So we don't get into the day, and you didn't get it when you came in? Okay. So anyway, work with your teams. Take this as your ticket to lunch. Know that I won't make you stay till 2:35 or 3 o'clock to fill this out. And then you get lunch free of work. Thank you.
But, you know,
we definitely don't run a right.
If you're not here in these meetings, then it's maybe a little bit hard for our supervisors that aren't coming to fully understand the purpose of it, which is kind of what we were saying as a bring your supervisor, not so our supervisors could get trained in this, but an informative, this is what this team is for, this is what they're capable of, this is what they've learned, this is how it has worked at like a...
I have some suggestions, sure.
More of an informative, and like Steve was saying, inform the districts or whatever, let them know who we are, what skills we have, and why we have these teams.
Okay,
and we're just not being utilized.
Right, and then
people don't know.
a referral to your team and some discussion and suggestions for interventions could prevent the need for a full-blown behavior intervention plan.
And it may be like, that's an excellent example for people to share from their districts what they're doing to make their district aware, because maybe an idea will come up, oh, maybe we could do that in our district, or no, that definitely won't work in our district. So what we can do to help each district make their district more aware, they've got this resource available and give it a sense of importance to them.
Okay, so what could we do? What could ISRC do to help you help your districts or co-ops be more aware?
I really like what Steve said before about if ISRC is coming out and say, well, you have a behavior team, right? Can they come out and meet with us? I think that would be very helpful.
Okay, so as we go out,
that
okay,
they have this resource, and if you go out to meet on a kid or to provide some training.
That is something we've been talking about, yes. Okay.
Definitely the training, I agree with that totally. Co-teaching and let them see that, oh, well, you know, they're working together, they know the same things, right? And instead of ISRC maybe not be the first thought next time, but oh yeah, we've got the team that works with them.
Yes.
That was part of the other thing that we were working on as far as this binder and everything, along with the referral form was a, hey, this is what we do, that we were going to pass out to all the teachers in our program so that they
could you
would
bring
know.
a copy to share
Sure,
for a show and tell next time? Okay, great.
It's not until we find out we don't have jobs next year. So.
Anything else? Okay, Linda said she had some idea. Oh, one more question.
I just wanted to add one to the barrier. I think a barrier that we see too is we have all these meetings, and then we have pre-ARs, and we have ARs, and we have meetings, and we have meetings to make sure that the first meeting was fine. And they're not a waste of time, and they're all very productive. And at the beginning of the school year, everybody's, you know, let's go. Our population's changing so that we have a lot more multi-needs kids. So we've got the autistic kids, which are much more labor intense, much more challenging, and we have to change and adjust the bibs a lot. So to add to the barrier, one thing I notice is people are tired. You know, if they're tired, we need to have another meeting again, or, you know, you can only have so much time before school, and so much time after school, and so much time during school where you're thinking about this and meeting it. and meeting about it. And so now it's January, and I can already see, just from the beginning of the year when I said, I have to call a meeting on Johnny. Okay, we'll be there, and everybody's 7:15, they're there. Now people kind of stroll in 7:25, 7:30, which is fine, but I can just, it's wearing after a while.
So that is, you're calling special meetings, whereas if you had this regular monthly case review built into the regular schedule, that might address that a little bit.
And I don't think anybody would say that the meetings have been a waste of time, because they're all very productive, and we're in a departmentalized program, so we might not see each other unless we have these meetings. So it's a way that we can validate each other, and we can get information from everybody else. But it's also, now that half the year's over, we're like, oh, thank God, the half the year's over, but shoot, got another, half year to go.
Right.
And you can just, of course, it's not with the same enthusiasm as it was in August, but as a behavior specialist, I think, come on, guys, we're halfway through. We still have a long way to go here before June. So I guess that would be kind of my concern, is how do I keep staff, I wrote it down, how do I keep staff, still charged up and ready to not say, oh, geez, another meeting.
What reinforcers can we come up with for staff?
Yeah, cookie schedule.
PBIS for staff.
PBIS for staff, absolutely.
Did I see one more hand up? No? Okay, Linda had some ideas to share with us also, so here you go. Thank you. Thank you. And I'll collect these as you leave.
The example that we've set up for this afternoon has taken 4 years to put our team into place. You are looking at one very exhausted psychologist. When I came on to Leica, I think I'm still there. When I came on, I was responsible for doing all of the case study, and I did 115 the first year I was there, plus 9 behavior plans and monitoring it. This shoulder, these 2 eyes, and a lot of assistance from staff, whatever time they could pull apart. We started to look at a different model. The way that I was able to come into talking to my administrator is to actually say, here's how many days I work, here's how many hours I work in those days, and here's how much I'm taking home. Next year, I'm not going to do this. We have to think of something different. We either have to hire another staff, yeah, right, that's easy, or we have to reduce what I'm doing, yeah, that's easy too, or we have to figure out how to get everybody up to speed. We then spent 2 more years in the process. We started training our immediate staff on this problem-solving model that you're going to see. It is through, in many buildings, it's called principal-led problem solving. The idea is definitely for the administrator to be quite involved in the process. So the model that we adopted, we looked at lots of them, and the model we adopted was supposed to be administrator-driven. In our programs, if a principal wasn't there, either our current administrator or the program supervisors had to be at each of our discussions. So that was the first thing. We trained the psychologist, the social worker, key teachers, all of our program supervisors, what the model was. And if you want, later I can talk to you about where you can get that training, or how ISRC can assist with some of that. That took us a year. At this time last year, we said, how are we going to make this work? And what ended up happening was we looked at the coming year's schedule, and what we're talking about and what we were able to carve out has worked a little bit, needs some tweaking, but in year 3, what we have done now is every Wednesday we already had in-house staff meetings planned. That was part of our routine. Those in-house staff meetings have now gone to all of our programs, so that we now meet in the sites. We have made sure our permanent sub position or a sub is scheduled months in advance to have so that teachers can rotate in and out as we're talking. So we have a block of 2 hours with a sub present. We can pull the teacher out so the teacher can be part of the team. Third of all, we have carved out times for what we now call the intervention team. It used to be the social worker and psychologist team, but because we've gotten some new people in there, we've changed it to the intervention team, or the I team. You're going to meet many of them in a moment. For us to meet and brainstorm about what else we needed. But the part that we started with was the data of me going to my boss and saying, you want me to deal with these changing kids. 4 years ago, 6 years ago, how many behavior plans did you ask the psychologist to write? How many more have we gotten now? What does our current youngsters look like in terms of their multiple needs? And if we're going to start addressing those multiple needs, what models can we use? So that was the beginning, and that's how we sort of moved it to the process that you're now going to see a role play of an actual situation. We do have a program supervisor, or in this case at the high school, a dean that was also involved, that wasn't part of our deaf and hard of hearing services. So that if you're sitting here going, oh yeah, they're lucky, they got extra staff, they can do it. I'm telling you, it was me working weekends to start driving that boat, because if I wanted to complain, I had two choices. I could stay in the job or I could move on. I didn't want to leave that job. I drove the boat to get started so that I would have assistance. It's possible. That's the message I want you to. So what I want you to do is go back to page 19 of your own plan and take one take-home message. What are you going to do different besides complain that it can't happen? What one idea might you be able to think about how you can talk to your administrators about doing this? That's sort of setting yourself up for success. What do you want the system to look like? Now, let's see if I not blind you. All right, the case example that I now want to talk about. Oh, let me finish with Jay. Somebody had asked about what it looks like for his tracking sheet. Do we have any idea why we're not here? Oh, the fan's coming on. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, we'll let that heat up or whatever for a moment. Oh, there we go. All right. This plan you can't read because it's an Excel sheet and it's very small. So I'm going to blow this up in a moment. What you have here is a period of time that ends with every 15 minutes starting at 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Okay? So the form has the abilities, and then each of these columns then are targeted specific behaviors that we would look at. So let me just show you, for example. All right, so his head on his desk, unable to concentrate, sleepy, tired, low energy, refusing to work, self-selecting an alternative activity or work. For Jay, that was a big one. Cooperative, completing tasks, increased agitation, unable to sit down, attempts to destroy materials, and then physical aggression toward an adult. And if we went further, we broke that down into smaller parts. So that's what the tracking sheet looks like. Do I need it on the computer? No. Could I be doing it another way? Paper and pencil or paper clips and counting? Absolutely. Could you use your little counters over here? Absolutely. It does not have to be computerized to be able to use the tracking sheets that are on there. Questions about tracking? Okay. Uh-huh.
Things like head on desk, I just want to know a little bit more of the details of how you counted that. If you put his head on his desk and he left it there for the entire 15 minutes, what would you count? One time head on desk?
We decided, yeah, all we were looking, yes. We weren't doing it every time. Look up, look down. If it happened during that time, it was like, was it present? What is it not present?
Okay.
Yeah.
If it happened during that time,
And the team actually tweaked. That was our shorthand for what we had. We had another sheet of paper that actually had the behaviors listed out in a lot of detail to what to look for.
Thank you.
But and at some point we separated them out, and at other times we grouped certain kinds of behaviors together, because what we're looking for there is really low energy versus hyper energy, which if we went further along, that would be what it would look like along that way. Okay. All right, so this problem-solving approach, you have a separate handout, which is the form for the problem-solving that you're going to see this group going through. We're going to go through each of the steps, and what I've said to Sherry is I didn't want to give you the script, but I will email Sherry tomorrow with the completed problem solving that you're going to see the team go through so that you'll have it in hand afterward. So you'll actually have that handout. So I'm going to ask the team to introduce their roles, but would you also tell what your real role is if it's different?
Do you want any background on this kid?
Not yet. Oh, yep, sorry. Okay, let's see. One mic. You have two of these here, guys. One mic. And this is the mic that is for the video. So that probably could sit in the table, and this one you probably need to pass. Later, yeah.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Koss, and I'm a social worker with the LICA program. I've been there for 13 years.
I'm Terry Bernstein. I've been with LICA for 20 years. I've been in the classroom for the past 20 until this year. Part of this 4-year plan, they decided to put a teacher on the team because I know what it's like day to day to be in the classroom, so I'm an interventionist is my new position.
I'm Laura Litterst. I'm the dean, but that's not really what I am. I'm classroom teacher. It's my first year with LICA.
And I'm Cheryl Goldman. This is I win the prize, 30th year with LICA. And this is my first year, however, as one of the LICA school counselors. For the other 29 years, I was a classroom teacher all the way from kindergarten through seniors in high school.
Oh, that does remind me, back to the question about teams. This team, this team does actually go from our youngest preschoolers all the way up to our kids who are finishing in high school. We have different administrators who come in and out, and we have different staff. For example, Bonnie tends to work with our older students, and Cheryl tends to work with our younger students, and being the only psychologist, I get to work with all of them. But we do discuss kids at all 3 of our programs, our elementary, our middle school, and our high school. And so if any of us are called in, and our itinerant, I keep forgetting, thank you, and our itinerant program. So if any of us get called in, especially with the tip of the red triangle kids, we make sure that all of us know and can cover for each other on those, and that's why we make sure as a team we're doing that.
I'll just put these together.
Thank you. There we go, okay.
You just want to get on the video.
It's my best side.
Thank you.
That's
That makes, okay, I have a lot of sympathy for teachers who have to wear more than one assistive listening device. I've been thinking that all day. All right, so the student that you're about to hear about is a high school student who's been part of our LICA program for many years. All right, never mind. I'm going to let the team tell you about this. Now, the other thing that they want to give me grief about, yes, you can't hear. All right, so we did something to it when we taped it up.
No, it wasn't working before.
It wasn't working before. Here you go.
Sorry. It is on, so it's, oh no, it's not on. It's on. The switch.
Okay, there we go. Oh, now you're, okay. So the team likes to give me grief. I happen to have been away on the first meeting date that they actually sat there, and I won't give you all the details, but they gave me a lot of grief about this. So I'm going to really turn it over to the team. I'm going to continue to work the projector to go along with the different slides of what they're discussing. So this was actually a case where I knew of, but these guys did the work.
Well, and just to give you a little background, it says on our sheet, is this up? No. That we started this on November 15th, but the reality is that he's been in trouble and he'd been problems and he'd been on our radar since he came to us in 7th grade. Cheryl was his teacher, 7th, 8th grade.
And what's interesting is that I'm actually standing in for the teacher who actually is at the high school, but I know the student, and when I was looking at my script, the behaviors that we saw in 7th grade are the same behaviors that are on this list. I would say that at least 50%, now he's a freshman. So when Linda said before, you do the same thing over and over and over again and you don't get any results, that's why this model is really working for us, because we are finally getting results. That doesn't mean that the behaviors are extinguished, but that we're moving in the right direction. So it was kind of enlightening for me to go, wow, yep, oh yeah, 7th grade, still doing it, still doing it, still doing it. So that's where the that's his history a little bit. And he was also moving from California, so I mean, he wasn't even in the Chicago area, but he quickly found a little group that he could hang out with.
We have the steps that we go through, and when we do this in our LICA program, we actually have a binder on our table so that we all stay on track, because it's very easy to get sidetracked and start talking about a different part of the process, and you always want to jump ahead and start making conclusions, start trying to fix it before you've really looked at the problem. So for our sake, we have this little binder that we follow that has these exact slides that will tell us where we need to be in this process. And if somebody starts straying, then we can say, oh, that's a really good thing, let's hang on to that, but right now we're really defining the problem. Let's look at defining the problem. So that's important.
So what brought this up is that every Tuesday we have our staff meetings, and any kids that come up that our teachers have concern about, they get to be talked about. This kid had come up probably every week from August until November 15th. He had already been suspended for stealing from a store across the street, and had already had our kids in high school have open lunch, so they're free to go out across the street, go wherever they want, as long as they're back on time for their next hour class. He always came back on time, but when he was out, we didn't always know what he was doing, and then we were finding out that he was sometimes stealing. So on this day, then we got together and we started our problem solving, and the first question is, let's just go through and list out the problems that we're seeing. So what's going on with Andre? What's he doing?
Well, we know he's been stealing. He stole from Target, and he also stole from a locker, an open locker in the gym. He stole a watch, so we know that happened.
He's also, he's disrespectful in the classroom. And when I say disrespectful, this is the part where someone on the team will say, well, what do you mean by disrespectful? You have to be specific. So when you say someone is rude or someone is disrespectful, well, what does that mean? Okay, he throws his homework on the floor. He pounds his fists. He says no. He'll actually do this to you. Okay, so now we're defining disrespect.
Also, when he came back from stealing, he showed no remorse. He didn't feel sorry. He wasn't embarrassed, and said he didn't care that his mother was embarrassed either that he had stolen. He didn't care.
Yeah, that's been seen other places too. When he's being reprimanded for something, he says, I don't care. Does it bother you? No, I don't care. We see that phrase a lot. I'm not embarrassed, I don't care.
And one other thing too, one of the things that we notice about Andre is that, at least in a structured setting, he tries to keep it together, but anytime he's given any freedom, any unstructured time, whether it's even 3 minutes passing period, can I go out and get a drink of water? You wouldn't think that would be a problem, but it can be. So any unstructured time, he's just letting loose, and he knows.
Okay, so hold on, we've gotten a little further there. So have we gotten all of the problem behaviors?
Most, not all, no.
Go for it, keep going.
All right, so I'm going to go
He's
on.
swearing, we have a few more.
Okay.
He's swearing, he breaks the school rules.
He does WWE moves, if you guys
Yeah,
are
he
familiar
loves
with,
wrestlers.
The wrestlers.
Towards
Again,
teachers, towards.
And ongoing. We're talking 3 years of doing wrestling moves, 3 years of knowing that you don't do wrestling moves in school, and 3 years of still doing the same behavior.
He's also asking to borrow money from friends often and doesn't repay. So his friends are complaining that that's an issue.
That's a lot. And you know that we can't address all of that at once.
Okay, there's your list. We put it up behind you.
Yeah, I think you have it counted out. 14 things. We need to prioritize what it is that we want to address first, because we can't address it all at the same time. So as the teacher, what do you think would be the priority? What do you think we need to focus on right now?
I think his stealing. His stealing is, interfering with the rest of his day, because if he's caught stealing, then he's suspended from school, in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension, and then it's interfering with his learning. So I would think that stealing really should be number one on the list.
Anything else?
Well, the physical aggression. I mean, other kids, when he was a 7th grader, not that you wanted to get by, but he was kind of a small kid. Well, here he is now as a freshman, and he's maybe 5'10", and it's, physically aggressive. It's threatening to other children. It's threatening, using his body to kind of almost threaten teachers. And so I would think that that physical aggression would be, yeah.
How about you try to work on his feelings of remorse?
We did talk about that when we talked about the fact that he wasn't sorry. And you can only change what you can change. We can't change his feelings and his attitudes. We can change his actions, possibly, but we can't change how he's going to feel. We can't make him feel sorry that he's.
We can hope for that.
Right.
The other part of that is to try to figure out what's reinforcing. So instead of working on the remorse, what the team's going to discuss in a little bit is what motivates him. Because we can't get to change, we talked this morning about you can't change what's changeable situations and what's not, and whether a kid feels remorse or not, we can't get inside their bodies and make them feel that. So what we're going to try to do is come up with a discussion that actually looks at what will be motivating to him, as opposed to how do we help him not actually feel, we're not going to beat him up to make him feel bad. Did you want to?
So you can't show him the effects of his stealing or his other...
Oh, yeah, we're going to get to that. But, to actually target having him feel more remorse is not really measurable or a way that we have a lot of change ability.
I think because of
See, you guys are all stealing.
don't care, that don't care attitude, don't care, don't care, don't care. It's very hard to teach someone that they should care and that there's that should word. If he can't internalize that, we have to deal with those behaviors that we can actually see and target, and then hopefully eventually he'll internalize that people care about you, and so now you can care about others. But until that time, it's really hard to teach, after you don't care for 15 years, to care.
Find out what he cares about?
Right.
That's what we.
Yeah, and we're getting to that too. I mean, in his reinstatement meeting, after his suspension from stealing, he's crying and crying. No, he's not crying. His mother's crying. I mean, he's not crying. And his mom said she's embarrassed, and his response was, I'm not embarrassed. So that's just who we're dealing with. That's the kid we're dealing with.
And I think as an outsider who hasn't lived with it, and that's where Terry was coming from when she was coming to be part of the team. I wanted Terry to get to meet this kid, and unfortunately, he was coming back from suspension instead of going to be in class. So instead of going and observing him in class the way she had planned to, she ended up coming in, sitting on the reinstatement meeting, which was very informative to get to know a little bit about this kid, because in 30 minutes, she probably learned what we've been learning over the last 3 years. And that at home, he gets what he wants, and his mom's pretty much afraid of him, and so we had to work really hard to find what motivated him, because he was pretty much getting everything he wanted anyway, at home.
Which, that's not in the, we'll stick
I'm just sticking with the background, though. Okay, so we have our list. We're saying stealing and the physical aggression, the WWE moves, that's what we want to focus on. Can we define stealing and define the physical aggression?
This was a difficult thing to figure out because we can't shadow him every second of every day to make sure he's not swiping something. So we certainly often get reports that he's stolen, sometimes from the police, sometimes from friends. So we can track that. We can track reported stealing, but we can't necessarily track potentially every aspect of stealing.
So we know when he's been caught, but we don't know that he's not stolen other times.
Right.
But we also can go into his locker, so that there are opportunities where if he says not me, nothing, not take anything, you can open up his locker and get the visual information.
And there it was.
Yep.
And the dean, didn't you say you would be able to do that, be able to do locker checks? And it's different in school, that's not a breach of his
Yes, and
rights.
there's no warning needed. Those checks can be made anytime.
And will you do that on a regular basis?
Sure.
Thank you, Dean.
We have to stay on the step that we're on right now.
So we can check, though. We can check with stealing with that, and obviously any reports.
Okay, and then what about the physical aggression? You had mentioned the WWE. Are there other things?
I mean, there's, again, a lot of it is going to be reported behavior, because we don't have the ability right now to have someone actually shadow him every second of every minute of every day. But we can measure if kids are coming and reporting, and also just being diligent observers. You know, sometimes we have to take a couple of minutes in the hall, maybe we have to do something really quickly, but stand in the hall and watch them.
Flip the page. So what is the level of expected, there we go. What is the level expected for the behavior? So I know we have a student handbook. Are the rules posted in the classroom? Does he know what's expected from him?
He knows because at the beginning of the year, we kind of do our own little PBIS and do explain what our expectations are. We try to use the word expectations, not rules, because our psychologist told us to. And limit it to 5. And so at the beginning of the year, we set up some basic expectations. And that is, you know, to respect and to communicate clearly and be responsible, and I forget the 4th one. But we went over those rules, so they're expectations, so they are clear.
I want to borrow this for a second. All right. On your second handout, not the one with the slides, that's where we're following. And so right now we are on page 2 of your handout, where the top says what standard was utilized, consider peer comparison, the student level of performance, and the discrepancy statement. That's where this team is currently at, so that you can follow along in your forms.
Well, I think it's clear compared to other peers in his actual classroom and in the whole program that he is breaking the school rules more often than his peers. There is definitely discrepancy there. He's not following the rules at the same level as his peers. The ones that are stated in the handbook, as you mentioned, as well as the classroom expectations, he is not following along like his peers.
And have you found anything that would motivate him, that would make him maybe want to change his behavior?
I think he's very materialistic, and so some motivation has been a tangible reward, whether it's earning points to get a magazine, or, I mean, they're bribes, basically.
One of the things we talked about when we met with the dean on his reinstatement was that we were going to call home every week, and that we wanted Mom to not let him use things over the weekend if he had had a bad week based on our behavior plan. Mom said she would follow through. Are you willing to call home every week?
Absolutely.
And follow up with Mom?
And because Andre comes from a non-English speaking home, I think I would have to have somebody interpret and translate, and that's where the dean comes in, because our dean happens to speak Spanish and sign.
So I can make a plan to call home each week and communicate with the parent and keep that communication flowing back and forth, so if anything's happening over the weekend, we can address it.
And you would do that with Andre present? You would do that with Andre present so that he is aware, not saying, I'm going to call Mom, but actually see you call, because I think that that's really important.
I think him seeing that shows a consequence, if you will, of what happened during the week. He knows that that call is going to be made, and he's present for it. And I think it's fair for him to know what's going on.
Another thing that we know is motivating for him, he got his off-campus privileges taken away with the second stealing incident, and he did care about that. He cared about that quite a bit.
As I recall, that was the only thing that made him cry. He didn't care about the other things. When he found out that he wasn't going to be able to have lunch out, then he cried. So he did have some tears. Okay, so far we know that he's had 3 suspensions. So the discrepancy statement would be, just from everything that we've been writing down so far, it sounds like Andre's breaking school rules more than his peers, he's stealing, and he's physically aggressive.
Correct.
All right. Yep.
So, next page of your handout.
Do you want to talk? Okay, so the next part of this, flip the chart, is problem analysis. Why is this problem happening? Is it that he can't do something, or is it he won't do something?
So we have to decide whether or not well, you said that you think he really understands the school rules. Are we seeing places where he is following the school rules and places where he's not. I think we talked about how he's breaking the rules more often in open time and unstructured time. Do we think that's because he's not being watched? If he's following the rules when he's being watched and breaking them when he's not being watched, then we know he can follow the rules.
I'm a little confused. Earlier you were focusing upon stealing as the problem behavior.
Stealing and physical aggression.
We picked 3, which is more than we usually do, but for him, we felt they were all part of the same. We had stealing, physical aggression, and following the classroom listed expectations.
And did you do a procedure to make sure they all had the same function, or are these 3 that you're just trying to decide which one to focus upon?
We came to those 3 when we prioritized. And I think that part of the school rules is that he doesn't steal. So that, I mean, it wasn't listed as one, but certainly being respectful and being responsible includes not stealing.
In this problem-solving approach, and this is what happens as a group, is your question is not yet where we can even get to it. What we're used to jumping into with a functional behavioral analysis is, why is this happening? But with a problem-solving approach, the first thing we have to do is come up with what are all the behaviors. Then, once we start to look at it, it's this problem analysis is where we start to get into the functional behavioral analysis. But first identifying, is it a can-do? I should change the slide here. Wait a second. Is it a can-do or won't-do kind of a situation? If we can get to a point where it's another way of looking at that same information in a functional behavioral analysis, but what we're really looking at is, does the student engage in this situation? Is it appropriate? If it's not, is it because of the skill or because of their performance of something? So where they're at right now in their discussion, we will get to the function of that behavior in just a short amount, but we're doing a lot more discussion ahead of time to try to compare how bad is that. And oftentimes we need more data, and that we start out functional behavioral analysis too late in the situation. And this is a lot of pre-work to that. How do you know how many times he's doing? Now, the stealing is a little different, but the breaking rules, for example, he breaks more school rules than any of his peers. That's the discrepancy statement. He's doing more, I mean, we're looking at his behavior compared to the other students and trying to come up with this analysis. So that's step 1, is really to look at the problem and to see how significant it is when we compare it either to some standard, oftentimes the teacher's recommendations, what their expectation is, what's already been charted on the wall, how they're blatantly doing it differently. Second is, compared to the other students, compared to the peers, do you see them all? And some of his peers have been engaging in bad behaviors, quote unquote, we won't get to that right now, but not to the level of he was the one who was stealing. So his behavior is significantly much more problematic than his peers, which then took us from a yellow level of the PBIS triangle up to the red and saying this is an individual part. And so that's where they're at in the discussion.
So on the skill or performance, I'm hearing you guys saying that you think that this is not a skill issue, that you think he can do it, he's choosing not to. And you're saying that it happens most often in unstructured settings. Okay. So then,
And because he does respond to external motivators at times, then he can stop certain behaviors. I mean, if you're sitting with him and you give him constant reward, whatever that is that you've decided that day, if you have 10 points at the end of this class, you will get so-and-so. He is capable. He is able.
Okay, when I came back into the situation, before we could go any further, we weren't sure, just the question that you had brought up, we don't know what is motivating to him. So we need to take some time. We're going to take a time out in this process. We're going to find a time to re-meet. And in between, we need somebody to go and talk to him, interview him, and find out what kinds of things he would like to earn since he is motivated by items. Which of you would like to do that? Thank you, social worker. Okay, we also know that Andre does not follow the rules, and so somebody needs to do a quote-unquote reality check with this guy. Where does he want to go in his future, and does he really understand that if he has an arrest record that that's going to follow him? Does he really understand that that's going to keep him from future employment? And who would like to work with him on that? Okay, so the two of you are going to do that. And then I noticed that we had been talking about whether or not his parents may be having more issues with him at home. And I'm wondering, in terms of mom in particular, because she was at the reinstatement meeting, what is she willing to do and what is she not willing to do? And I think that before we continue with trying to come up with a plan, we need to have that information. And so you're going to follow up with mom. Okay. In terms of Terry, you and I are going to continue to monitor along with the teacher, pop into classes and just see how he's doing, maybe follow him between classes and continue to gather more information based on our own observations of that, right? And thank God, we don't need to do any standardized testing on this child, so we can continue.
Okay, so possible hypotheses for these behaviors. Any ideas? We're saying that it's a behavior problem. We already figured out what the motivators are. Do you think he's doing this to get attention? Do you think he's doing this to get stuff? Do you think that these are sensory needs? What do you think it is?
Get stuff.
That's what he said
He
in
wants,
the meeting.
he wants
stuff.
things, he wants games, and he wants them now, and he thinks he deserves them now.
And he even, not that he's hungry all the time, but he wouldn't mind working for a pizza or being able to go to the cafeteria after school and get a bottle of pop. Because at this point, we allow him to not bring any money to school because we don't know. Did I get ahead of myself?
No, we forgot to mention that part, that he got his right to carry money taken away.
Oh, yeah. Because he was borrowing money from kids and not paying it back, and because he was stealing money, we decided that he couldn't bring any money to school. And he was basically not patted down, but checked by the teacher every day to make sure that he didn't have any money, and that included his locker as well. And so if he can earn money, then, or points, then we would arrange for him to be able to get something in the cafeteria at the end of the day.
You know, I think that if we look at this, this should look very familiar, like a functional behavioral analysis, right? The function of the behaviors. I disagree that it's all for objects. I think that sometimes he may be trying to avoid some attention. That's why he's doing it at unsupervised times. And I think at other times, he really does do well with an audience. When he did actually steal, he had several of his peers watching him. Thank goodness, that's how we found out. But I think that one of the other things is that he wants to look cool in front of his peers. And I think that that's a big one for him. And one of the hypotheses that I would look at is that attention is also part of it, not just objects.
Do you have this on a slide?
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to the...
Wait, question?
I have a question going back a little bit. Real quick. When you were talking about calling home once a week for mom and telling her about the good week or bad week, would you think that a reward that's a weekly thing is too long? What if he completely blows it on Tuesday? Does he earn it back? Does he not? Does he not care the rest of the week? I mean, if you say on Tuesday, oh, I'm calling your mom on Friday, that's a long time to wait.
At this point in the classroom, they already have these punch cards that they're using.
Jumping ahead.
I'm not, because it wasn't part of the program. They had it already. We just decided to use that.
Daily set up as well.
There's something daily, there's something in every class where they're getting punch cards where, because the teacher brings that to our attention, we decide to use that as part of our plan. All the kids, there's 3 kids in that particular class, and they're all on this punch card system. We just added to that punch card system so that there would be daily feedback, and that even if he did screw up on Tuesday, by Friday he could still earn his computer time or whatever we decided with the mom. But that's a really good point. We talked about that too.
I also, conjunction with that, I was concerned if mother's intimidated by him or afraid of him, how can you ask her to take away privileges? Isn't that, would she be willing to do that if she's afraid of him?
She said she was. We had talked to her about that last year when he was in 8th grade, and I don't think she was as willing to then. She really couldn't say that, but she and her husband, her new husband who's not his dad, did come to the meeting when we had meetings on him and his behavior last year during 8th grade, and we did not have as much success. But when she came this year, she did say that with our assistance, that she felt like she could follow through on that. So far, she hasn't had to. So far, he's been good.
We're trying to condense a lot, too. A lot of different things happen, and some of this stuff we hit later, but we did talk about the need of parent education, and this particular parent wanted to be able to support us, and we realized we needed to lay it out very, very clearly, like no PlayStation, so why don't you take the controllers away and put them where he doesn't know where it is. She needed like us to help walk through the steps of how to follow through so that in the moment she knew this was her plan and what she needed to do. And so with that kind of support, she was able to do it. But we really had to be much more involved on a regular basis and give her very clear, specific ways to follow through on her part. And then we saw better results with Mom.
And because there is no real communication going on at home, because parents don't sign, it's very difficult, and they don't speak English and they don't sign, so that's why the weekly calls have to come home just as a kind of reality check to see what is happening.
I think so many of us are probably dealing with something that's very similar to what you're talking about today. Do you find that your team needed to make home visits to help this mother if she was willing? I have found a brick wall with enthusiastic parents that then sort of drop the ball on you. And I just...
Obviously, you're going to have more support sometimes than others. You're going to have those families where you have zero support. That doesn't mean you still can't do what you need to do. We're jumping all over the place. If this was our meeting right now, we'd say, okay, remember, right now, we're working on our problem analysis, and part of that's going to be looking at the home and how we can involve the home, perhaps. But right now, we're trying to figure out what's going on with his name? Andre, I'm going to use his real name, Andre, to make sure that we have a clear as a picture as we can. And you're right, sometimes it's wonderful when you have wonderful follow-through at home. This is sort of an in-the-middle kind of a case. We realized we needed to give the parent more support, and we got some, but we've had situations where we get zero support from home, and you can't deal with it. So right now, back to problem analysis.
If somebody on your team needs to go do home visits, who would that be on the team?
We would decide. It could be, probably social worker, but could be others.
Was it interpreted?
Yes.
I wouldn't need a sign language interpreter, but I would definitely need a Spanish interpreter.
The question is that when I think maybe you guys have kind of jumped to the end of the discussion of this because, the idea of the positive intervention strategies of working with mom first to try positive intervention strategies as opposed to taking something away.
Absolutely.
Did that not work with this particular child? Or was that
We'll
not
get there.
considered? Or?
We'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah, I promise. It's part, yeah, I promise.
But I do want to answer your question from before. I think that having the calls going home has helped the mom a lot. And I mean, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but in this case, it was more the teacher who dropped the ball than it was the parent. So it's a lot of work. There's no question about it, that it is a lot of work. It wasn't her. That's why I could easily say that. But I mean, it's hard. It's a lot to put on your plate.
Okay, so now we gather all this information. We're going to put them back on the right step that they're on. So on your handout, you see a whole grid. It should look like this one. I want to explain before we get to that. This is really an opportunity for us to talk about gathering data and why it's so important. So the first thing that we're going to do is come up with some hypotheses. Why do we think that Andre is doing this? Second of all, it's on your problem-solving sheet. I'm sorry, so it would be like the 4th page of your problem-solving. I'll tell you when to go back to slides. Right now, you don't need the slides at all. We're going to look at the review of records, and we're going to say, wait a second, is there anything in the records? Well, what we've heard from this team is these aren't the first time these behaviors are occurring. Okay, so we do look at the records either by talking to former teachers or actually reading what's in the file. Second of all, based on interviewing mom, the teacher, and now because Bonnie said she was going to go talk to Andre himself, we're going to take that information and see, does any of the information we're getting support what we think is the hypothesis of why this is occurring? So a number of us have gone and observed him in school in different situations. We're going to use those. And then if the case would be, do we need any standardized assessment or testing to go along with it? So those are the riot. That's why those are colored in. So what the team is now going to do is take their information back from their functional behavioral analysis and say, what is motivating? What is he doing this because he's trying to get attention, trying to get something? What are all those reasons? So they're now going to get to this discussion of trying to figure out all the motivating parts and try to pull this together with what is the strongest hypothesis of why we think this behavior is occurring. So if you're following along in your blanks, this is the page you should be on. Which is that one for you.
So what we need here is some hypotheses. Do we have any ideas why he's doing or what he's trying to get out of some of these behaviors? I know you had said earlier that you thought it might be to look cool. So that's one thing we could put on there. Anything else?
To look cool and get attention, but also the tangible object. Sometimes he stole, we think, because he wanted that object.
And I think that everything with him is immediate. He's very impulsive, which is a whole other issue altogether. But that he wants, like a 6-year-old, I want it and I want it now. And I can't wait.
And we mentioned that so far, too, he pretty much, that works at home. Mm-hmm. He throws a little tantrum at home and he seems to get what he wants, is what we're kind of hearing. So
sounds like we have pretty good hypothesis, and some of this has been seen in the review of records, some of it has been in interviewing, some of it we've actually observed. And it sounds to me like we don't need any testing. That will make Linda happy. No testing.
So in terms of interpreting this then, it would seem to me that the most powerful, based on lots of observations and the test review and the record review, and when we looked at what has worked in the past, is that we really need to be looking at how he can get tangible items as the biggest motivator. But if we look at the fact that it has to be pretty immediate, and we look at the fact that it's to gain attention, that those are probably going to be the kinds of interventions that we want to look at, besides what we've already just discussed about how do we help out at home and do some stuff on the plan. So do we have a statement of what the hypothesis would be?
Give it to me. The problem appears to be a performance issue and is not a skill issue. He knows it's wrong to steal. He wants to get something. He waits until no one's looking. He does it during unstructured time, so he knows that is when no one will be looking. And he wants to get that object, and he wants to get that attention from his friends and to ultimately look cool in front of them.
So we've gathered a lot of information. Now comes the hard part of making a plan. So what is our goal in the plan, in our intervention plan?
Oh, wait. Would you just say that we're now on the next page?
Oh, we're on the next page. Is this an plan?
Plan development. Those are each of the items.
All right, Linda, you better hop in now, because I don't know where you're at.
Okay, if you look at your first question, here's your goal. Here's your goal. First question, what is the goal?
Okay, so we're on our plan development. I had asked before, so what is our goal?
well, we wanted to see him be able to follow the school expectations on a more regular basis. And I mean, this took some time to get here. To figure out that we were going to get to this point. So we figured we wanted to give a good 8 weeks to see his ability to maybe follow some of these expectations and maybe be able to earn lunch off campus, which was a really big motivator for him. So if he could follow some of these rules in, what do you think, 8 weeks?
Sure. Just to get some background, these are like these little cards that are.
They have them on this.
This is the card. And so there's 25 punches on that. So in each class period, they can earn 2 punches for following all the rules that are listed in the classroom. If they do something that.
There's the rules.
And if
That's
they
from
do
the
one of the
classroom.
bad behaviors, then it's the teacher gets to decide if he gets 1 punch, 2 punches, or no punches. And they have these index cards with a big plus on it for positive. And so when they fill up a card with 25 punches, then they get an index card, and the 25 punches become $25. And so the cards then go up the wall on a chart. And as they get closer and closer to 100, that's when they earn lunch out with me. And we had a cutoff date of when they were to earn their punches to get to go out. But if they have bad behavior where it's worse than just you don't get your punch, then they could get a little red that's got a little negative sign on it that we decided was like 1/5 of the 25 punch green card that goes up on the wall, and then they get a little negative card, which then just makes it that much harder to get up to the 100 spot. So this is what it looks like,
was in
and this
place
is a negative.
And I think also what's important about that is if you notice, Bonnie said they. So when somebody said not fair, how come for him, how come not for me? In the class that he's in, we found that it was a good idea to use this plan with everybody, that they would benefit. No, their behaviors were not in the red zone. No, neither one of them had a behavior plan in place, but this benefited the rest of the students in the class as well. So it became a team motivator.
I also want to point out that the I-team didn't come up with this. This was the classroom teacher's plan. And so we wanted to support what she was already doing. We maybe would have come up with something a little bit different. But you got to have teacher buy-in too. So you have to work as a team. And this is what was there. So we tried to tie that in with what we are seeing with Andre.
We also wanted them to have success the first time out of the box. So 8 weeks wasn't long enough. And we extended it 2 more weeks so that everybody was successful and we all got to go out for lunch.
I want to digress for just a moment, because there is no tracking plan for these guys. But I can walk into a classroom and I can take those punch cards and I can tell how many a kid has been getting. What they started to do on the punch cards after we had this discussion, oh shoot, there we go. And you might not be able to see it in the slide on the right, but if you turn these cards over, what the teachers are now doing is actually putting a slash with the date, so that as you go around clockwise, you actually see how many punches each day the student got, so that we were able to assess very quickly with data. There are no charts, and this, this is how we tell whether success or not. Andre happens to be the one on the far right. One of his peers has already gotten $50 worth of punches. I don't need any further data. It's already part of the system. The kids are part of it. They know turning in their cards, they're going to get one of the green cards.